She said, "We need space," while texting another man. I agreed, then vanished to another state. When her world collapsed, and she desperately needed me, I wasn't there to answer. The person who picked up? It shocked her to her core. My name is Samuel Mitchell. I'm 58 years old, and for the past 32 years, I thought I had a solid marriage. I owned Mitchell's Auto Repair in Phoenix, Arizona, built it from nothing but a beat-up garage and a toolbox my father left me. Heather and I raised our son James there, watching him grow up between oil changes and brake jobs. Life felt predictable, stable, like a well-tuned V8 engine. But engines break down when you ignore the warning signs. It started small. Heather began spending more time on her lifestyle blog, something she called Desert Rose Living. She'd always been creative, taking photos of our backyard cacti and writing about Southwestern decorating. I supported it, even built her a home office with custom shelving. The blog grew, and with it, her confidence. She started attending blogging conferences, networking events, weekend workshops in Scottsdale. That's where she met Brad Marsh. Brad owned a digital marketing company, one of those smooth-talking guys who wore expensive polo shirts and drove a leased BMW. He began commenting on Heather's posts, offering to help her monetize her brand. Soon he was texting her about business opportunities, sending articles about influencer marketing, suggesting coffee meetings to discuss strategies. I wasn't suspicious at first. Business is business, right? But then I noticed how her phone was always face down during dinner, how she'd step outside to take certain calls, claiming they were collaborative brainstorming sessions. Her laptop became password protected. She started buying new clothes, saying she needed to look professional for video content. The real red flag came during James's birthday party last month. Our whole family was there, including our daughter-in-law Sophia and our 8-year-old grandson Jack. While I was grilling burgers, I saw Heather in the corner of the yard, typing furiously on her phone, smiling in a way that made my gut twist. When I approached, she quickly switched to her camera app, pretending to take photos of the desert sunset. Later that evening, after everyone left, I was cleaning up when her phone buzzed on the counter. The preview showed a text from Brad. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Our secret project is going to change everything." I didn't confront her. Instead, I did what any smart mechanic does when something feels off. I started paying attention to the details. The mileage on her car didn't match her claimed destinations. Credit card statements showed lunch charges at restaurants she'd never mentioned. Her browser history, when I could glimpse it, included searches for how to rebuild your life after 50 and signs you've outgrown your marriage. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with a temporary phase or midlife crisis. This was systematic, calculated. She was building an exit strategy, and I was the last to know. But here's the thing about mechanics. We're good at taking things apart and putting them back together. And sometimes, when something's too broken to fix, you salvage what's worth keeping and let the rest go to the scrapyard. I just didn't know yet that I'd be the one doing the scrapping. The first piece of hard evidence fell into my lap by accident. I was fixing Heather's car, a routine oil change she'd been putting off for weeks. When I popped the hood, I found something that made my blood run cold. A folded receipt wedged between the battery and the frame, probably blown there by the engine fan. It was from a Phoenician resort. 2 dinners, 2 glasses of wine, total bill $127. Dated 3 weeks ago, a Tuesday when Heather claimed she was attending a blogger meetup at a local coffee shop. The receipt was signed, and the signature wasn't hers. It was Brad's. I stood there in my garage, grease on my hands, staring at that piece of paper like it was a death certificate. In a way, it was the death of whatever trust we had left. I'd been married to this woman for over 3 decades, and she was having dinner dates with another man while lying to my face about it. My first instinct was to confront her immediately, wave that receipt in her face, and demand answers. But 30 years of marriage had taught me something about Heather. She was quick with excuses, quicker with tears, and fastest of all with turning herself into the victim. If I came at her with accusations, she'd find a way to make me the bad guy for spying on her. So I did what any smart mechanic does when diagnosing a problem. I gathered more data. I started paying closer attention to the details. Her phone was always charging in the kitchen now, never upstairs where I might glance at it. She developed new habits, longer showers, expensive perfume I'd never seen before, a sudden interest in working out at the gym. When I asked about her day, Her answers became vague, rehearsed, like she practiced them. The breakthrough came when I was cleaning out her home office. Heather was at another business meeting, her third this week. While organizing some old tax documents, I accidentally knocked over a backup laptop, the one she rarely used. When it hit the floor, it opened to a browser page she'd forgotten to close. It was a private messaging app I'd never heard of. The conversation thread at the top was with Brad Marsh. My hands shook as I scrolled through months of messages. What I found made me sick to my stomach. They weren't just discussing business. They were discussing us, Heather and me. She was complaining about our boring routine, calling me predictable and set in my ways. She wrote about feeling trapped in a life that doesn't fit anymore, and how Brad made her feel alive again. The worst part was reading Brad's responses. He called me the anchor holding her back, and suggested she needed to create some space to figure out what she really wanted. He even joked that guys like me were too comfortable to change, and would probably just accept whatever she decided. That last comment hit me like a wrench to the gut. Too comfortable to change? They thought I was some pushover who'd just roll over and accept being discarded after 32 years. I screenshot everything and uploaded it to a secure cloud account. Then I closed the laptop and put it back exactly where it was, acting like nothing had happened when Heather came home 2 hours later. She walked in glowing, humming some song under her breath, and kissed my cheek like she always did. "How was your meeting?" I asked, my voice steady. "Oh, she said, already heading toward the shower. "Same old business stuff. Brad thinks we can really expand the blog's reach." "I bet he does," I thought. I just nodded and smiled, playing the role of the comfortable, predictable husband they thought I was. But they had no idea what this predictable husband was planning. Knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is control. Once I had proof of Heather's affair, I didn't waste time on self-pity or rage. I channeled that energy into strategic planning. My first stop was the bank. I've been handling our finances for 30 years, but Heather had never paid attention to the details. She knew we had joint accounts, but she didn't know about the business accounts, the investment portfolios, or the property holdings I'd accumulated through careful planning and hard work. I met with our financial advisor, Tom Bradley, a guy I'd known since high school. Tom had helped me structure everything to minimize taxes and maximize growth. Now I needed his help for a different kind of protection. "Tom," I said, sliding the printed screenshots across his desk, "I need to restructure some things. My marriage is about to get complicated." Tom read through the messages, his expression growing grimmer with each page. He'd met Heather at numerous social events, had probably considered us one of the solid couples in our circle. "Samuel, I'm sorry to see this," Tom said finally. "What do you want to do?" "I want to protect what I've built, legally and properly, but protected." Over the next 2 hours, we restructured my financial empire. The auto shop's assets moved into a business trust. My investment accounts shifted to individual ownership, based on documentation showing they'd been funded entirely by business profits. The rental properties I'd bought over the years, those moved into a separate LLC. Everything we did was legal, documented, and based on existing ownership structures Heather had never bothered to understand. She'd signed papers over the years without reading them, trusting me to handle the boring financial stuff. That trust was about to bite her in ways she couldn't imagine. The beauty of it was that none of this required her signature or notification. These were corrections to ownership structures that should have been implemented years ago. I was just finally getting around to proper documentation. By the time we finished, Heather's claim on my assets had shrunk dramatically. The house was jointly owned, and she'd get her share of that. But the business, the investments, the rental income that had been funding our comfortable lifestyle, all protected. "She's going to be shocked when she finds out," Tom warned. "She should have thought about that before she started planning her exit strategy," I replied. "I'm just making sure she gets exactly what she contributed. No more, no less." That afternoon, I opened a new checking account at a different bank. I set up direct deposit for my business income and moved my emergency funds. The joint account would stay open with enough money to cover household expenses, but my real assets were now safely separated. Heather noticed nothing. She came home that evening talking excitedly about some new project Brad was helping her develop. She'd never been more animated, more enthusiastic about her future. She just didn't realize that future wouldn't include access to the lifestyle I'd been funding. 2 weeks after restructuring my finances, I decided to test how deep this betrayal went. I needed to know if Heather was just having an affair or if she was actively planning to leave me. The difference would determine my next moves. I told her I was taking a weekend fishing trip with some buddies, something I did a few times a year. Instead, I booked a room at a hotel 15 minutes from our house and settled in to observe. Friday evening, Heather texted me, "Have fun fishing, honey. I'm staying in tonight. Maybe working on some blog posts." At 7:30 p.m., I watched her leave our house dressed like she was going to a high-end restaurant. 20 minutes later, I followed her car to Morton's Steakhouse, where she met Brad at the valet stand. They didn't just hug. They kissed like lovers who'd been apart for weeks instead of hours. I took photos from my truck, careful to capture their faces clearly. Then I followed them inside and requested a table where I could observe without being seen. They sat in an intimate corner booth, holding hands across the table, feeding each other appetizers, completely lost in their own world. But it was their conversation that really opened my eyes. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough fragments to understand what they were planning. Words like timing, financial planning, and new beginning drifted across the restaurant. At one point, Brad pulled out his phone and showed her something that made her eyes light up. Real estate listings, from what I could see. They were house hunting. Together. I left before they finished dinner, but I'd seen enough. This wasn't just an affair. It was a full-scale replacement operation. Heather wasn't just cheating on me. She was auditioning her next life. Saturday morning, while she was supposedly sleeping in after her quiet night at home, I made my most important call yet. I contacted Ray Torres, a private investigator who'd done some work for my insurance company after a suspicious garage fire years ago. "Ray, I need documentation of an affair. Professional quality, admissible in court if necessary." "How much documentation do you want?" he asked. "Everything. Dates, locations, financial records, communications. I want a complete picture of what they've been doing and for how long. That'll take some time and cost some money. How about both? Just make sure it's bulletproof." Ray was thorough. Within a week, he documented 3 more dinner dates, 2 overnight hotel stays, and what appeared to be apartment hunting in Scottsdale. He even managed to get photos of them looking at engagement rings at a jewelry store. Engagement rings, while she was still married to me. The final piece of evidence was a recorded phone conversation where Heather discussed divorce timelines with Brad. She wanted to wait until after the holidays, she said, to minimize the impact on James and Jack. How thoughtful of her to consider the family she was about to destroy. But the most revealing part was her discussion of finances. She assumed she'd get half of everything. The house, the business, the investments. She was already making plans for that money, talking about the life she and Brad would build together. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She had no idea that while she was planning to take half of what I'd built, I'd already moved most of it beyond her reach. Her fantasy future was built on assets that no longer existed in the way she thought they did. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for her to walk into it. The confrontation came on a Tuesday evening in October. I was in the garage working on Mrs. Peterson's Toyota when Heather appeared in the doorway, fidgeting with her wedding ring like she was trying to twist it off her finger. "Samuel," she said, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness she used when she wanted something. "We need to talk." I set down my wrench and wiped my hands on a shop rag. "What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath, like she'd rehearsed this moment. "I think we need some space, to figure things out. We've been in this routine for so long, and I feel like I'm losing myself." There it was. The words Brad had coached her to say, probably practiced in front of his bathroom mirror. I could have laughed if it wasn't so pathetic. "Space," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "What kind of space are we talking about?" "Just breathing room. Time to think about what we really want. We're not the same people we were 30 years ago, and maybe we need to acknowledge that." She was using Brad's talking points word for word. I'd heard variations of this speech in the recorded conversations Ray had provided, but I played along. "I understand," I said calmly. "How much space do you need?" Relief flooded her face. She'd expected a fight, tears, begging. Instead, I was being reasonable, predictable Samuel who always gave her what she wanted. "I don't know exactly. Maybe I could stay at my sister's for a while. Or you could visit James more often. We just need to not be in each other's way while we think." "That makes sense," I agreed. "In fact, I've been thinking about taking some time myself. Maybe traveling, seeing parts of the country I've never been to. I could close the shop for a few weeks. Her eyes lit up. This was going better than she'd hoped. Really? You be okay with that? Heather, if you need space to figure out what makes you happy, I respect that. I want you to be happy. She actually hugged me then, probably feeling guilty about how easy this was. Thank you for understanding. I knew you would. What she didn't know was that I'd already made arrangements. My travel plans included relocating to Colorado, where I'd purchased a small auto shop in a town called Durango. The papers were signed, the lease was active, and my tools were already being shipped. We need space, she had said. I agreed, then moved states. She thought space meant a few weeks of separation while she played house with Brad. I understood it to mean permanent relocation to a place where she'd never think to look for me. The next morning, I loaded my truck with personal items and drove away from the life we'd built together. Heather was at Brad's, probably celebrating her successful manipulation of her predictable husband. She had no idea she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Colorado suited me better than I'd expected. Durango was a mountain town where people minded their own business and judged you by your work ethic rather than your personal drama. Mitchell's Auto Repair became Harper's Garage, and within a month, I had a steady stream of customers who appreciated honest work at fair prices. I changed my phone number, closed my social media accounts, and established new banking relationships. As far as anyone in Phoenix knew, Samuel Mitchell had simply vanished. The only person who knew my real location was James, and I'd made him promise to keep it confidential. "Dad, what's really going on?" he'd asked when I called to explain my sudden departure. "Your mother needed space to figure out her life. I'm giving her all the space she wants." James was smart enough to read between the lines. "Dad, is Mom seeing someone else?" I paused, considering how much to reveal. "Son, your mother is making choices that don't include our family. I'm making choices that protect what's left of my dignity and my future." He understood. "Whatever you need, Dad. I support you." 3 weeks into my new life, Ruth Hansen had her stroke. Heather's mother collapsed at her assisted living facility on a Thursday afternoon. The facility called Heather's emergency contact number, but she was probably with Brad, ignoring calls from numbers she didn't recognize. When they finally reached James, he called me immediately. "Dad, Grandma Ruth had a stroke. Mom's trying to reach you, but she can't find you anywhere." "What did you tell her?" "Nothing yet, but she's panicking." "What do you want me to do?" This was the moment I'd been preparing for. "Give her Sophia's number. Tell her all communication goes through your wife now." James understood immediately. "Sophia's going to handle this. Your wife is smart, son. She'll know what to say." When Heather finally got through to someone who could theoretically reach me, she found herself talking to her daughter-in-law, a woman she'd always treated as an outsider who wasn't quite good enough for her son. "Sophia," Heather said, her voice shaking, "I need to reach Samuel. Mom's in the hospital. It's serious." There was a long pause. Then Sophia's voice, calm and measured. Samuel asked not to be disturbed. "This is family. This is important." "I understand," Sophia replied. "I'll let him know if he decides to respond." The line went dead. The next time she needed me, I wasn't there to answer. And the person who did pick up? She shocked Heather to her core by treating her exactly the way she'd treated others for years, as someone whose problems weren't her priority. 2 months into my Colorado life, I received a call from my Phoenix attorney that I'd been expecting. Heather had finally figured out that her temporary space had become permanent separation, and she was ready to fight. "Samuel, your wife filed for divorce," Tom Bradley said. "She's demanding half of everything and claiming you abandoned the marriage." I laughed, actually laughed. "She asked for space, Tom. I gave her exactly what she requested." "Well, her lawyer's painting a different picture. They're claiming you had assets and fled the state to avoid marital responsibilities. Good thing we have documentation of everything we restructured before she made her request, isn't it?" The legal battle that followed was exactly what I prepared for. Heather's attorney, some hotshot from Scottsdale that Brad had probably recommended, came at us with accusations of financial fraud and emotional abandonment. They demanded forensic accounting, asset discovery, and immediate spousal support. What they found was a man who'd meticulously documented 30 years of marriage, every financial decision, every asset purchase, every business investment. The auto shop had always been separate property. The investment accounts were funded entirely by business profits. The rental properties were legitimate business acquisitions. Everything I'd moved into trusts and individual accounts was exactly where it belonged legally. I hadn't hidden anything. I'd simply organized it properly. The real blow came when Tom introduced Heather's own evidence against her. The private investigator's reports, the photographs, the recorded conversations with Brad about spending my settlement money. All of it became part of the record. Your Honor, Tom addressed the judge. Mrs. Mitchell asked for space to explore other relationships and make plans for her future with another man. Mr. Mitchell simply accommodated her request while protecting assets he'd legitimately acquired through his own business efforts. Heather's face went white when the recordings were played. Her own voice, discussing how much money she expected to get from divorcing me, how she and Brad would use those funds to start their new life together. The judge's expression grew colder with each revelation. The final nail in the coffin was her credit card records. While she was claiming financial hardship and demanding immediate support, she'd been spending thousands of dollars on clothes, jewelry, and romantic getaways with Brad. Her credibility crumbled completely. Mrs. Mitchell, the judge said finally, you asked for space to pursue other interests. The court finds that your husband provided exactly what you requested. Your claims of abandonment and hidden assets are not supported by evidence. She got the house, which came with a mortgage that would strain her blogger income. She got half of our joint savings, which amounted to about $30,000. Everything else, the business, the investments, the rental income, the comfortable lifestyle she'd taken for granted, stayed with me. Brad disappeared 2 weeks after the settlement. Apparently, a woman with limited income and a hefty mortgage wasn't the investment opportunity he'd been expecting. While I was building my new life in Colorado, Heather was dealing with the aftermath of her choices in Phoenix. James kept me informed, not out of malice, but because he wanted me to know how my grandson was handling the situation. Dad, Mom's not doing well, James told me during one of our weekly calls. She's been posting a lot on social media, and it's getting ugly. Heather had always used her blog and social media to curate an image of perfect domestic life. Now she was using it to process her divorce, and the results were spectacular in the worst possible way. Her first posts were sympathy-seeking, going through a difficult transition. Thank you to everyone who's been supportive during this challenging time. Classic victim positioning. But as reality set in, the mortgage payments, the reduced income, Brad's disappearance, her posts became more desperate and revealing. She started sharing inspirational quotes about betrayal and abandonment, clearly directed at me. Some people will abandon you the moment you need them most. The problem was, people weren't buying it. Her followers had watched her document her relationship with Brad through barely disguised posts about exciting new connections and rediscovering passion. They'd seen the expensive purchases, the fancy dinners, the weekend getaways she claimed were business trips. Then James made his move. My son had inherited my strategic thinking and his mother's understanding of social media dynamics. He posted a simple comment on one of her more dramatic victim posts. Mom, everyone can see your Instagram stories. We know about Brad. That single comment unleashed an avalanche. Her followers started connecting the dots, scrolling back through months of posts, finding the contradictions and lies. The blogger community she'd worked so hard to join turned on her with a viciousness that only social media can provide. Wait, weren't you posting about new adventures and finding yourself just a few months ago? Didn't you say your husband was supportive of your personal growth journey? I remember seeing posts about business dinners that looked suspiciously like dates. The comments poured in, each one more damaging than the last. Screenshots of her earlier posts were shared, proving she'd been celebrating her affair while maintaining the facade of a troubled marriage. Her follower count plummeted as people realized they'd been following a fraud. But the worst part for Heather was the professional fallout. Brands that had been working with her blog pulled their partnerships. Other bloggers distanced themselves from the drama. Her carefully built online presence, which she'd planned to monetize as her new career, collapsed in a matter of weeks. She tried to control the narrative, posting long explanations about complicated relationships and personal growth, but the internet had already moved on. She'd become a cautionary tale about authenticity and consequences. Meanwhile, in Colorado, I was getting more repair work than I could handle and enjoying weekend hiking with a photography group I joined. My social media presence consisted of pictures of mountain landscapes and restored classic cars. The contrast couldn't have been more obvious. While she was drowning in the wreckage of her public lies, I was quietly building a life based on honest work and genuine relationships. A year after leaving Phoenix, I received an unexpected visitor in my Colorado shop. I was under the hood of a vintage Camaro when I heard familiar footsteps on the concrete floor. "Hello, Samuel." I didn't look up immediately. I finished checking the timing belt, wiped my hands on a shop rag, and only then turned to face Heather. She looked older, thinner, and there was a desperation in her eyes I'd never seen before. "How did you find me?" I asked calmly. "James finally told me where you were. I've been calling him for months." Her voice shook slightly. "Samuel, we need to talk. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But we can fix this. We can work it out." I leaned against the workbench, studying the woman I'd been married to for 32 years. "What exactly do you want to work out, Heather?" "Our marriage. Our life together. I realize now that Brad was using me. I see that clearly now. But you and me, we built something real. Something worth saving. We did build something," I agreed. "For 32 years. And then you asked for space to tear it down." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean permanently. I just needed time to figure things out. I never meant for you to disappear completely." "Heather, you didn't just ask for space. You planned my replacement. You discussed spending my money with another man before you even divorced me. You celebrated our anniversary while planning your exit strategy." She flinched. "You know about the recordings?" "I know about everything. The dinners, the hotels, the apartment hunting, the engagement ring shopping. All of it. But that's over now," she said desperately. "Brad's gone. I'm alone. I realize what I threw away. You're not alone because Brad left you, Heather. You're alone because you chose to be. You chose him over me, over James, over Jack. You chose excitement over loyalty. You chose fantasy over reality. People make mistakes, Samuel. Don't I deserve forgiveness?" I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse rather than just regret over consequences. "Forgiveness isn't the same thing as restoration, Heather. I can forgive you for what you did to our marriage, but I won't rebuild what you deliberately destroyed. So that's it. 32 years mean nothing. They meant everything to me. That's why your betrayal hurts so much. But I'm not the same man who let you walk all over him for years. That man is gone." She tried several more approaches, tears, anger, promises, guilt, but I remained unmoved. Finally, she played her last card. "What about Jack? Don't you want to be in your grandson's life?" "I see Jack every month, Heather. He flies out here with James. We go fishing, hiking, camping. He loves Colorado. The difference is, now he sees his grandfather as a strong man who respects himself, not someone who accepts disrespect for the sake of keeping peace." Her face crumbled when she realized that even her final leverage was gone. I'd rebuilt my relationship with my family on my own terms, without her mediation or control. "I'm sorry, Samuel," she whispered. "I'm truly sorry. I believe you are. But sorry doesn't undo choices, and it doesn't rebuild trust. You wanted space to find yourself. I hope you eventually do." She left without another word. I never saw her again. 2 years after that final conversation with Heather, I was sitting on the porch of my cabin outside Durango, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Jack, now 10 years old, was beside me, carefully organizing his fishing tackle for tomorrow's trip to the river. "Grandpa," he said, holding up a particularly colorful lure, "do you think this one will work on the big trout?" "Might," I said, ruffling his hair. "But the secret isn't the lure, buddy. It's patience and knowing where to cast your line." James and Sophia had driven out for another visit, bringing news from Phoenix. They'd sold the house. Heather couldn't afford the mortgage payments and had moved into a small apartment. She was working part-time at a local retail store, her blogging dreams having collapsed along with her credibility. "She asks about you sometimes," James had told me earlier. "Wonders how you're doing." "How am I doing?" I'd replied. "I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing." And I was. Harper's Garage had become the go-to repair shop for classic cars throughout southwestern Colorado. I had a waiting list 3 months long and was training 2 apprentices who reminded me of myself at that age. Hungry to learn, respectful of craftsmanship, understanding that good work speaks for itself. I bought 20 acres in the mountains, built a small cabin with my own hands, and created a life that fit exactly who I was meant to be. No compromises, no walking on eggshells, no enabling someone else's selfish behavior. Jack looked up from his tackle box. "Grandpa, are you ever lonely?" It was an insightful question from a 10-year-old. "No, buddy. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I'm alone by choice, but I'm not lonely. I've got you, your dad, your mom, my work, my mountains. I've got everything that matters." "What about Grandma Heather? What about her? Do you miss her?" I considered the question carefully. I missed the woman I thought she was for 32 years. But that woman was mostly my imagination. The real Heather made choices that took her out of our family. That was her decision, not mine. But you're happier now, right? Much happier. Because I'm living honestly now. No pretending. No making excuses for other people's bad behavior. No sacrificing my self-respect to keep peace. As darkness settled over the mountains, James and Sophia came out to join us on the porch. We talked about Jack's school projects, Sophia's new job, James's promotion. Normal family conversations, but peaceful ones, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone under the stars, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. Heather had asked for space, thinking it would give her room to manage 2 men and 2 lives simultaneously. Instead, it had given me room to rediscover who I was without her manipulation and control. She'd wanted space to find herself. I found myself instead. The mountain air was clean and cold, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of winter. Tomorrow, Jack and I would fish the river, and I'd teach him about patience, persistence, and the satisfaction of doing things right. These were the lessons that mattered, not the drama of betrayal and revenge, but the quiet strength that comes from living with integrity and surrounding yourself with people who value what you value. I'd build a good life from the rubble of a bad marriage, and this foundation would last.